Welcome back. Joe Fortin here. Today I'm going to talk about Satanic Ritual Abuse and MK Ultra mass mind control programming. And I'm going to just give a sort of general overview of the types of things that I'm going to be addressing, because this doesn't just apply to people who have directly been victimized by cult abuse or intelligence agencies. This has been done to basically the entire population, and to varying degrees. And I'm going to explain once again sort of how that's been done and how the actual mechanics of these things work. And I'm going to talk about healing from this using a system of medicine known as Heilkunst homeopathy. And I'm going to go into some of the reasons why I believe that this particular system is actually superior to what you generally see within that community. With people seeking to heal from this, going to more mainstream psychologists who, basically, are certainly well-meaning and definitely have helped people to heal, but they're using modalities, in my opinion, that either take an extremely long time to get to the root of the problem because of some of the issues I'm going to bring up, and in some cases are not effective because they're looking at everything on the mental plane, right? They're addressing everything in the mental body, but they're not addressing like the cellular memory, the body memory. There are certain aspects of the client's consciousness that they're not able to access for various reasons, and I'm going to discuss part of this. The main issue that you deal with in helping someone to heal from this type of programming is the memory gaps that that people run into. Most of the people, who, believe that they've been a victim of this have massive memory gaps. And I can tell you that's certainly the case for me. By the time I was in my early 20s, I couldn't even remember high school. Like I'd completely repressed, most of that part of my life because it was like horrific. And so this is one of the issues that people, with heavy childhood abuse, especially heavy childhood sexual abuse, run into, is that they often can't remember the things that they're trying to heal from, which presents a massive problem. How do you heal a trauma timeline event that you can't remember? Well, Heilkunst very effectively addresses this and deals with it. And it's not the only way to address and deal with it, but I think that from my experience and what I've learned, I think it's probably one of the best methods that I've seen that will enable a client or a patient to move through these things and to heal these things, even if they don't have a conscious memory of what's going on. So I'm going to just briefly discuss what's gone on a mass scale. I've talked about SRA before. SRA is Satanic Ritual Abuse many times. And there are people like Fritz Springmeier, for example, who've written books that go into a lot of the details on how this programming is done, and how corporations like Disney, for example, have been, putting subliminals and subconscious programming into their films, and essentially installing distorted archetypes in people from a very young age. And I'm going to just explain a little bit more detail about the mechanics of how this works. So they have people who have gone through like the very, very high level abuse, right? Like Kathy O'Brien, you know, someone I personally know is Sarah Ashcraft, right? And what these people endured was absolutely unbelievably horrific, right? What happens is that basically enough of these people get programmed with these extremely distorted satanic archetypes, right? What that does is it starts feeding those archetypes into the grids, the consciousness grids, right? Like Carl Jung talked about the collective unconscious, right? And what it does, it takes essentially archetypes which are part of the mechanics of this reality field, right? Everything's based on archetypes. All of our personalities are conglomerations of different archetypes, right? It takes those archetypes and it reprograms them. And then, you know, when people connect themselves with those archetypes through symbolism and through subliminals, you know, in the media, what it does, it starts to reprogram their unconscious and subconscious mind, right? It's connecting you with that energy. It's connecting you with those grids. And so you yourself do not even have to have been a direct victim of this for it to be affecting you. And you can clearly see the results of this just by looking around at our culture and looking at really how sick most people are. I mean, you know, just look at something like Pornhub, for example. Just go look at the front page on Pornhub and like look at the top trends in there. I mean, they're literally promoting you know, they're promoting incest, they're promoting child abuse, basically. Like, you know, they try to make the girls look as young as possible. You know, they're promoting women treating themselves like pieces of meat, like objects. And if you look into the stats on porn, and this is just one little piece of society, if you look at the stats on porn, the numbers are basically irrefutable. I mean, the women who get into porn have all been sexually abused. And, you know, what I'm going to say is that all of us, basically all of us on this planet right now, have essentially sexual abuse, either directly or we've picked it up in our morphogenetic fields, we've picked it up in our DNA, and we're resonating with it because of the distorted archetypes in the grids. Now, so that's just a basic primer to understand what I'm going to be talking about moving forward here. I would highly recommend checking out Lisa Renee's website, ascensionglossary.com. It has a lot of information about how all these things work, sexual misery programming, you know, just mass mind control programming, basically. And when you start to heal from these things, you start to elevate your consciousness. The contrast between what real love is and what most people are programmed with becomes very, very clear. Most of the people on this planet have no idea what true love looks like. It's completely foreign to them. And it's really sad. It's really sad. And this is a big reason why. So one of the things that people with SRA programming, with MK Ultra programming, with childhood sexual abuse, which, you know, in the area that I'm in Florida, if you look around, most of the young girls that you see that are in their 20s that are really, like, you know, good looking, they've all been sexually abused. That's why you don't see functional relationships. It's one of the big reasons why. And that's why people date other people that are bad for them. Right? I've watched it over and over and over again. It never made sense to me. I was like, why do all these women date men that are abusive? And it didn't make sense to me until I started understanding all of this stuff, right? They've got archetypes installed that make them that way. Like I've talked about the Jezebel spirit, right? They're not in control of themselves. They lack autonomy. It's essentially satanic programming that makes you crave and lust after vampiric archetypes, that you see in others that are a reflection of yourself, right? That are not in alignment with love, and that's really the truth. So one of the major things that you see with people with sexual abuse, not just in SRA, but just anybody who's been sexually abused, especially at a young age, is that they tend to have memory gaps. They tend to have repressed memories. And like I said, I'm someone, I have massive memory gaps. It's incredible, actually. And at this point, I am like pretty damn sure that when I was little, I went through some kind of pretty horrific sexual abuse that I have no memory of. I do have memory of some of what went on in my teenage years, and that was absolutely terrifying and horrible as well, which has led to most of the issues that I've had in my life. This is one of the major problems that people run into in trying to deprogram from things like SRA. So, I'm going to explain how Heilkunst can be used to address these things. And so I'm going to explain the basic method that's used in Heilkunst homeopathy to address people's trauma. And what you do is you set up a trauma timeline, right? So you start from the time that you enter the treatment, the protocol, the program, and you work your way back from there all the way to birth, right? And you address every trauma you've ever been through. You do it sequentially. And so you start from now and you work your way back. Now, the way that this healing modality is set up is if you get to a point in the timeline, right, where maybe you've forgotten something that occurred at that time, maybe it's just slipped your mind, or maybe you didn't even realize that it was traumatic. That happens a lot too. People who have grown up in toxic, dysfunctional households and toxic, dysfunctional environments their whole lives, people who've, been like addicts their whole lives, for example, they don't even know what healthy looks like. So unless they do a lot of research, they may not even understand that they've been emotionally abused, neglected. I mean, I didn't know. I didn't know this stuff until, I started really, really heavily researching and doing my own healing work. So if that's the case, what will happen with this particular modality is that if you miss a trauma in the timeline, let's say that you repressed a memory, or you don't realize that it was traumatic for you, your being will begin to exhibit symptoms of that trauma, right? So if, let's say, you had an event that caused you, I'm just going to look at the feeling aspect of it, caused you to feel a great deal of grief or fear or shame or anger or anything like that, right? If you start to move past that event in your trauma timeline, and you haven't addressed those energies that need to be addressed, you'll start to manifest them, right? And then if you have a good practitioner, they will recognize that and they will say, oh, we need to stop moving forward in the timeline. We need to address what's coming up now, right? And what that will do is that it will allow you to purge the energy of the trauma, right? And you will have the subsequent catharsis and realizations that come with the processing of those emotions. which means that you've got to feel it to heal it. You've got to sit through the emotions, and you've got to sit through the pain, and you have to, find healthy coping mechanisms, right? Which can take people time, because unhealthy coping mechanisms are essentially bad habits that have been wired into their neurology. And you've got to process all that out. Now, the other thing with SRA especially is that people develop alter personalities. Most of the people that I have attracted in my life, right, have a split personality. I think most people do, to be honest. Most people have, we all have different aspects of self, right? But for some people, there's a great contrast in this. For me, it used to be, my parents nicknamed me Joe Number 1 and Joe Number 2. Joe Number 1 was a great guy. He, was kind to everybody, always did the right thing, honest, hardworking, had great virtues and qualities, right? Joe Number 2 was somebody you didn't want to be around. And that was when I was heavily into my addiction and drinking. It turned into this complete other person, right? And also, a lot of the circumstances and the things that I went through while I was in that altar, basically, that I've kind of nicknamed the Sasquatch, like that's almost like my alter ego. I don't remember, right? Because my being, essentially, what happens in my case was I was being demonically possessed, right? And especially when I would drink, right? So your soul essence leaves your body, and something else comes in and takes over. And this is, I've talked about entity attachments, right? The reason they use sodomy, the reason they use sexual abuse in childhood is because sodomy attacks you at your root chakra, right? It is the deepest part of the unconscious mind, and they literally install demonic attachments in you. This is how it works, right? Most people have dark entity attachments, demonic attachments, which is why also doing things like shielding work and protection spells is very important while you're going through the healing process. Eventually, you will get to the point where you no longer have those vulnerabilities in your auric field once you've done all the healing, right? And that won't be an issue for you anymore. But while you're going through the healing process, you are vulnerable to demonic possession, and it is extremely important to protect yourself. So, I just got an answer, a text here real quick. So, yeah, and I think that Heilkunst is absolutely the most thorough means of especially healing, any type of emotional abuse, anything like that. It's very yang. So when you take a remedy, you are going to purge the energy out. There's no avoiding it. There's no bypassing. You're gonna feel it, and you can try to bypass by, using a poor coping mechanism like drinking alcohol or using drugs, trying to numb yourself out. But eventually, if you continue with this modality, especially in the time period that we're going through right now, you're going to get to a point where the contrast is so great that your body will not be able to sustain drinking alcohol or using drugs anymore, because it will be so out of resonance. It will be so dissonant to your being, the vibration that you move into when you drink, that you will experience instant karma. You will get sick. There will be all kinds of issues that come up for you at a certain point. And when I first started doing this, like 3 years ago, I used to be able to drink like a fish. Now, if I drink, I haven't drank in quite a long time, but, I will black out instantly. And I will become I still will become possessed, right? Which is why I don't do it. And if you stay in the heart center and you integrate all these aspects of yourself, you will become whole. And the advantage of doing Heilkunst is that even if there are aspects of yourself or alters that you don't know how to consciously access, and maybe the therapist you're working with doesn't know how to consciously access that alter, the energy of whatever trauma you went through, whatever's coming up in your being is going to present, regardless of whether you have a conscious awareness of the event or not, right? So this is the advantage with this type of healing. Now, some of these things can be uncovered through something like hypnosis, right? There are trained hypnotists and therapists that understand how to access the different aspects of consciousness, right? The different alters. But sometimes these can be missed, right? Heilkunst doesn't miss anything, right? If you miss it on a conscious level, it will start manifesting unconsciously, and you will start exhibiting symptoms while you're going through the timeline. So really, I think it's a superior method. The other thing I'm going to mention, and I'm not going to make this a super long video. I could talk about this for probably 2 hours, but I'm not going to make this super long today. This is a little bit of a preliminary video. It's the first time I've talked about using Heilkunst for SRA. But the other issue that I've seen is that almost every single person that I have read or talked to in that sphere, what they are doing is taking people that have been victims of SRA, and they are essentially making it so that the only answer that they give you, the only solution, is to find Jesus, right? You've got to find Jesus, right? You've got to become a Christian if you want to heal from SRA. And, you know, they cite things like, you know, when you're dealing with demonic possession or you're dealing with entity attacks, using the name of Jesus Christ to do a banishing or, you know, an exorcism works, right? And so they present that as proof that, you know, you got to find Jesus, you've got to turn into a Christian. And this is incomplete. And, you know, mainstream Christianity has many distortions in it that are not in alignment with true spiritual physics, that are not in alignment with the self-empowerment, right? With, you know, really the true mechanics of this reality field. And that's moving you into another spiritual trap, right? Now, I am a believer in Christ consciousness. I'm a believer in the Christ, right? And I'm a believer in the energy associated with the Christ, right? You know, that is essentially the archetype that humanity was based upon, right? Our 12-strand DNA template that, you know, if we are whole, we will be operating from, right? But this gets into a lot more advanced esoteric work. I am very much in resonance with Ashayana Dean's writings. I'm not saying I agree with every little thing she says, but I think that the information that she's giving in her books is mainly correct. And I don't like having religion jammed down my throat. So I'm going to tell you about one person that I'm aware of who, you know, like most of the people telling the truth, doesn't have a lot of subscribers, but her information's really great. She's a trained hypnotherapist. I did a video with her a few months ago, and her name is Underground Star on YouTube. I would highly recommend looking at her videos if this is something that you're dealing with. So, yeah. In terms of using the name of Jesus Christ to banish demons, and why that name, you know, using the name of that being is effective in dealing with, you know, darker energies. you've got to understand the mechanics of why that works. And so in order to understand why that works, you've got to study occult knowledge. You know, look into the writings of Peter Carroll, Phil Hine, and Chaos Magic. Look into planetary magic. Look into the mechanics of the Kabbalah, right? I don't use the Kabbalah, right, because it is a distortion, but it is important to understand the mechanics of it, because a lot of this reality field is based on that distortion, right? You got to understand how all these things work, how archetypes work, the interplay between the cold false light and the darkness, so to speak, within this reality field, and how you actually can use the false light to apparently ascend to a degree, what you would call ascend. So you can polarize yourself into the false light grid mechanics, and objectively your life can appear to be a lot better. But you're moving yourself into the light side of a polarity that is a reflection of the Ouroboros. The whole thing is based on distorted mechanics and, phase-locked Merkaba, right? The Fibonacci spiral, so-called sacred geometry, which is all a distortion. So this really needs to be understood if you want to be a whole, balanced being in alignment with the Christ, right? So, yeah, I've got a client session. I have to go. I could talk about this for hours, but I'm going to leave it here, and I will make more videos moving forward. But if you are someone who is dealing with PTSD, trauma, SRA programming, having a Jekyll and Hyde syndrome, which many people have, not being able to control your shadow or your dark side, we all have one, I would highly recommend using Heilkunst homeopathy as a means of integration. So that's all for today. Thank you all for watching, and have a good day. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button down below and click the icon to your left to subscribe. New content every week about spirituality and addiction from myself, Joe Fortin. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time.